welcome to The Luxury of Choice, a business-to-business sales skills and tips podcast brought to you by the training team of George James Limited. My name is Steve Vaughan, and I'm joined again today with my two colleagues, Pru Leighton and Jonathan Cooper. Pru, Jonathan, how are you both?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Yeah, very good. Thank you.
It's been a good week, thanks, Steve. Thanks for asking.
Good to see you both. So this is the first time we've recorded the podcast virtually, so fingers crossed all the technology is going to work for us. We were together when we recorded our last show. We were in our meeting in Warwickshire, and it was nice being around a table, but we're all in different places today, so fingers crossed the technology works for us. I'm sure it will. So we had some great feedback on our first ever podcast. We talked about the luxury of choice and prospecting. But today we're going to move on from prospecting into, okay, so we've got these sales leads. What do we do next? How do we move forward? How do we move these sales leads through? And how do we make them eventually, all being well, a satisfied customer? And something which I know is dear to all our hearts is something we call the sales process. But for somebody that isn't experienced in sales or perhaps doesn't necessarily understand what that means by that, what is a sales process? Jonathan, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, for me, it's just a series of steps that logically convert those leads. And as we talked about last time, they're very much driven by ultimately a territory sales plan. That gives you the focus in terms of where you go prospecting. Those leads are generated, and the sales process for me is a series of steps. Take those leads and convert them into customers that ultimately, will buy again, hopefully in the future and on the way. I think as we touched upon last time, also give us some referrals and recommendations as well. So just a series of steps, a simple series of steps to follow.
If we went and met somebody on the street, Pru, now who perhaps isn't experienced in sales and said, what do salespeople do? They'd probably say, well, it's all about charisma and personality and being a great talker. So are we kind of saying here that those things aren't important?
Yeah, of course they're important, but like anything in life, it's never a simple thing, is it? I remember when my children were little and when they were asked what I did for a job, they used to say, Mum just talks on the phone all the time. So clearly being able to talk on the phone is important. This is it's a complex, interesting, fascinating career to have, and you have to have lots of things. But what's a great relief to anybody who comes from a technical background like I do was to discover that being a successful salesperson has a process. What a relief that was to know that.
Absolutely. You've just described, Jonathan, what a sales process is in a very sort of generic format. Is the sales process, is it something that is like, just the process that anybody can go and download from Google or wherever? Or are we talking about specific processes for individual companies?
I think that's a great question, Steve. Let me try and answer that in less than a day. I think one of the first points I would make is that your process should in some way reflect the way in which your customers buy. So I think having an understanding of the customers that you sell to, how they typically buy, and of course that could change over a period of time, I think is a really important basis for any great sales process. Right. If you do go to Google, you're right. You can download 101 processes. I think you'll find some common ground across many of them. My observation would be when I, work with a whole range of companies, when I see their processes, the ones that perhaps work most effectively are the ones that match or certainly, align very broadly with the way their customers buy. So I think my short form answer to that question would be just that. Okay. I think that would be a great starting point for me.
Okay. And I saw you nodding to that, Pru. Do you agree to that?
Yeah, I agree. We have to have it is a series of repeatable steps that are effectively moving the customer through the various decision-making processes that they make. But of course, it does have to align with how they make their decisions. So if both sides work well, you have a successful, repeatable process.
So what are the benefits then for a business in having a sales process? In not a day, Jonathan, but in terms of the top level thoughts. What if we were to go to, and as we have done, gone to a company and say, guys, you need to think about your sales process. What are the achievable benefits that a company could get by having a defined sales process, do you think?
I think I'd probably want to answer that in a very slightly different way, Steve. And I'd start by being selfish from a salesperson's perspective. What's in it for them? Why use this thing called a process? All I will say, just personally, is that it saved me from making so many mistakes. And when I haven't followed the process, it's amazing how many times I've ended up actually not winning a piece of business or not optimizing a deal. So I do think I'd start with the salesperson. And then for them, for me, for any of us in selling, it's a great way to make sure that we make the very best use of the time we have, the resources we have. I think it helps set priorities. Sure. I'm not very good at doing lots of things at once, and it's always helped me understand, effectively, what is my next action? What is the next thing that I need to do when I look at all of my opportunities that are in my sales funnel or, in my sales pipeline? So I think for a selling perspective, selfishly as a salesperson, it's kept me on track. It's stopped me making mistakes, and it really has helped me make the very best use of my time, the resources around me, that's colleagues, money, products, etc., and ensured that generally I've done the right thing next, taken the right next action and the right next step. So for me, that selfishly, that's what was in it. Okay. And of course, dare I say, it's helped me achieve my sales target on many occasions, right? Yeah, I've missed the odd target, haven't we all? Okay, over the years, but broadly, it's been a wonderful tool in helping me actually exceed my targets, which of course is what we all aim to do.
Absolutely, it's what we're all about. So it's repeatability, it's consistency, it's knowing where we are. Is there anything else, Pru, that we need to think about here?
There's lots of things to think about. If you speak to anybody in a commercial role and ask them what they'd like as a gift, they'd say more time. We don't talk to any teams that don't say, I'm too busy. Yeah, I'd love to get round to doing that, but I'm short of time. And so I think one of the most important things about a sales process, if you follow it and understand it, it will give you ultimately more time. And I train a lot of very busy sales professionals, and I often see a bit of skepticism when we talk about it. But when they come back, they say, oh, it's amazing. I have so much more time because I'm following a process. I'm kind of being guided to what to do next, and it just makes me more effective. So yeah, I think it's really important.
And what about the customer in all this? Obviously, the customer's king ultimately. So, what does it mean for the customer to have a clean sales process on our side as the sales organisation? Either of you?
I'm very, very happy to add something there as usual. So I think for the customer, and I have talked to customers about this, believe it or not, and they truly appreciate the first of all the fit with the way that they buy things. So if you've designed your process correctly, they see that they have a buying process. Most customers have got some awareness of that, some more than others. That's fine, but there's a fit. So that when we're trying, as salespeople, we're trying to sort of fit our sales process, and we're trying to fit that together with the customer's buying process. That is relatively easy. I think for the customer as well, because of the way it's designed, it takes them on, a series of sort of logical steps. It takes them on a logical journey to ultimately buy something that will actually meet their requirements in full. Or if it doesn't meet their requirements in full, they're very conscious of where those differences might be. Sometimes, customers have a requirement that's the truly is the ideal, and actually there's no one there that can fulfill it precisely.
No,
but
of course.
At least then the customer's aware of where the differences lie. So for me, those would be two immediate things. And I think when you're selling into an account, perhaps talking to multiple stakeholders on different sites, I think a consistency of approach is also really appreciated. And of course, we do sell as individuals, but we often sell as a team, yes. And again, I think having a consistent approach, means for the customer that the approach of that team is also consistent. There shouldn't be any surprises in it. Those next steps should be clearly defined. And after a while, of course, as you build a relationship with a customer, they come to appreciate what's going to happen next. They always know what's going to happen next, and there's no harm in that.
And I guess, sure, and some of our customers, the products they buy, and some of the customers that we sell to, the sales organisations, or we train, should I say, their buying cycles can be several years for the big, high-value capital equipment. So I guess, Pru, for the customer, they may interact with many different people at that period of time, really. So is what we're saying that having a sales process means they get like a consistent experience?
Yeah, I think they do get a consistent, purposeful experience. I think there's this whole thing about however you describe professionalism in the sales role. But if you have a good sales process that, as Jonathan mentioned earlier, aligns with the customer's decision, buying process, however you term that, there's a sense of aligned purpose from both of you about what you're doing, why you're doing that now, what you should be doing next, and the things that you need to agree before you both in partnership move to the next stage. And I think that's why it's really important to have a sales process, because it does help clarity to the whole nature of what you're doing.
Could I just add as well that, I talked about, very selfishly from our perspective, helping you make the best use of time, resources. I think that can be done for the customer as well. They will often work in very streamlined organizations, and they've got the same challenges as we have as salespeople over time. And, a process that, enables us to be efficient and work with them efficiently is going to be appreciated. And I've had feedback previously in my life, not just about what I sold the customer, but actually how I sold it to them. And some of that feedback even included the efficiency, of the process itself. So,
gotcha.
Kind of proves it.
So I think we're all in agreement then the sales process is a good idea. But what we haven't talked about is what goes into a sales process. So if I was to ask you, Pru, what kind of things will go into, or what will be the attributes of a good sales process? If I'm a salesperson listening to this now and I'm thinking, well, I don't really know what my process is, which may be the case. What would be the things that would go into a good sales process, would you think?
I think it's interesting you mentioned that, Steve. Again, I do work with a lot of people who are newer to sales, and it's really interesting when you say to have a sales process and they look at you oddly and go, oh, I'm not sure. And we take people into these roles, but so often we share with them all sorts of really interesting things that they need to know: how to fill out their expenses form, how to book holiday, all things like that, but rarely share a sales process with them. So the attributes of a good sales process, well, it should be simple. I have joined an organisation once where they had 27 stages to the sales process, which would hardly be described as simple.
27?
27, yeah.
Good grief.
Yeah. So simplicity is a really important attribute, I think. I think the second thing that I would think to be an important attribute is there's real clarity about what you do in each stage and what triggers you to the next stage. And that may vary from business to business, but really understanding if I'm at this stage in my sales process, what do I need to complete? Who needs to be involved? And what means that we're ready to move to the next stage? I mean, we look at our own sales process in this business and we have 5 stages. And I think that's pretty typical of many businesses. 5 is a very common number to see in many businesses across the sales process. But it effectively moves somebody from being a lead to somebody who's made a buying decision from you. Fundamentally, that's what you're trying to do.
So keeping it simple and keeping it easy to understand, Jonathan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'd reinforce those points that Pru made. I think one of the most critical ones that I often see missing is that trigger for the next step. The purpose of each stage may have been well defined, the primary activities, and there may be the clarity of the stage, but what about the trigger for the next step? And defining that, I think actually is absolutely critical, and it's a great attribute for any process. Maybe another one to consider, I think, especially if you're selling products, services, solutions, which have got a very long sales cycle time, is also to think about an average, and I stress the word average, residency time as well. So as you're working an opportunity, how long would you anticipate it to spend at a specific stage? Because that's a very good way of managing any opportunity. Okay. That also generates some useful data as well for us as we look to manage our opportunities, in the context of the market, what the competition might be doing, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
I'd really stress that trigger for the next step. Absolutely crucial in any process. And if you don't have it, it's well worth taking a look at.
So just to come back on what you said about residency time. So just to, for anybody perhaps who doesn't understand what you mean by that really. So is that typically how long it takes to go from stage A to stage B? Is that what you mean by that?
Yes. Yeah. So let me give you an example. I can think of a case where customer selling very complex solutions. How many stakeholder groups would they typically engage with? Around about 12. Okay. This is in the clinical field. And within each of those stakeholder groups, there are multiple stakeholders. So as you can imagine, when it comes to the qualification of that customer, that's a pretty extensive piece of work, and that can run to weeks and weeks of time, to invest in really, really understanding the customer. That would, be a typical example of that. It might be you spend 3 months at that stage. Of course, if you could do that faster, that's great.
Sure.
But it should also be of a concern if it starts to drift out to 6-9 months. Is that starting to tell you something about, either your ability to reach the right people as the salesperson, or actually, the buying intent of the customer? It's certainly going to start giving you some good feedback.
Sure. So knowing where we are, knowing the next step, knowing when things are going wrong, Pru, is there anything else that we've missed in terms of the benefits here?
I think within any other sales organisation, we're all competitive animals, aren't we? I think the other great thing is knowing where you are compared to other people.
Completely.
If you really want to sort of raise the bar consistently, whether for yourself or whether as a sales leader, looking at why do people spend different times or effective or less effective at various stages? And it's not about having a big stick. It's all about, getting everybody up to the next level. I mean, it does sometimes come as a bit of a surprise. But if you're in a sales role, there is one thing that is going to be guaranteed every year, which is your targets are going up. So however you do, next year you'll have to do more. So being able to have something that objectively looks at what you do and going, how am I compared to that person who seems to make their plan every year and grow like mad? You can start to sort of go, where are they really good? Why am I different? So I think that's fantastically helpful in an organisation to be able to do that.
So knowing what you're good at, knowing where you're good at moving things forward, perhaps where you could perhaps get a bit better, and how you compare to your peers.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying there.
And I think I would add to Pru's comment about your targets going up. Very true. I think, wouldn't most salespeople be disappointed if they didn't? I think they'd be shocked if they didn't. I think the other factor to consider there, in all seriousness, is that you're probably almost certainly going to have less resource as well. Okay, as organisations constantly look to grow, to do that in a profitable way generally means we have to achieve more in less time, and sometimes with less resource. And the process is a really good way to get you to think about your business, and how you're going to achieve that at the very, very beginning, or, just before the beginning of your new fiscal year. So, there's another additional thought.
Sure. So thinking back on my sales career and my sales management career, which is 30 plus years, I guess, really now, thinking about the phrases and terminology that have been used by the various companies I work for. People talk about prospect pipelines. People talk about feeding the pipeline, talking about the funnel, feeding the funnel. Are these the kind of terms that people generally use when they're talking about their sales process, Pru?
Yes, they are. They're often driven by what their CRM says, to be honest, about.
Right.
But they fundamentally, and that's an interesting point, we have the luxury of viewing lots of different sales processes and how different organisations work, which is a great position to be in. And there are many different words used for exactly the same thing. And we can say, we see what you're doing there. But what's really interesting is when you start to check with people inside the business, they often feel that they're talking about the same thing, but talking about something completely different. So, when something, one of the biggest discussions I have is what's the difference between a lead or prospect and a sales opportunity? So what's the difference between those two? And I love that question when I'm in the training room. So I go, okay, let's decide. And it often causes this huge debate within the group about what the difference is. And that's perfect, because it says, if we could agree what the difference is, wouldn't our life be so much easier?
Absolutely.
Wouldn't we have much more effective communication within the business if we could clearly describe the difference? So, yeah, great advantage of a sales process is we can accurately place things and we fundamentally all agree what the difference was.
Yeah, absolutely, Pru. And that comes from, as you've said, without using the words, it comes from having that common language. You know, that's I think goes back to your earlier question, Steve, of the attributes. You know, the common language is critical across a team, across multiple teams, across multiple regions, territories, etc. And especially when you get into any international or global account management, it becomes even more important.
Yeah,
so
completely.
So that common language, great point, Pru. Absolutely. Yeah.
You just reminded me of there used to be a TV commercial, it would have been 20 odd years ago, with Rowan Atkinson for a credit card. And the catch line at the end was, we're both fluent, but in different languages. I think that's a good way of describing it, isn't it, really? So why is it, we tend to talk about funnels more than pipelines. So why is it a funnel, do you think, not a pipeline, Jonathan? Why do you think funnels are more appropriate than pipelines in sales processes?
Well, because I was always taught funnel, so I guess I was indoctrinated from a very early age. So I was taught funnel, so that's what I grew up with. And why do I prefer it? I guess to pipeline. It's because of the shape. Right. And that shape actually reflects, in many cases, the profile of your business. We start at the top with, if you think about the typical shape of a funnel, and I know you're probably all imagining different shapes of funnels, but just broadly, broader at the top, it's narrower at the bottom. We start with, a number of opportunities in play, and over a period of time, as we take those through the process, we end up with, the best opportunities towards the bottom of our sales funnel. So sure. I love the shape of it, but all I would say to anyone listening is they're both great models to use, and will leave you well ahead of anyone who's choosing not to use a sales process. Using that sort of model. So for me, and I probably I'm careless probably sometimes and interchange the two phrases.
I think we all do.
I work with a range of customers like we all do. Some use funnel, some use pipeline. I've seen other variations as well. I think the fact is, as long as it's a common language in your business, that's the important thing.
Absolutely. So, Pru, you used a phrase a moment ago which normally can sort of ring alarm bells in some salespeople's head, and that was CRM, those three letters, CRM. Now, I guess when we started, dare I say that CRMs were very basic, if they existed at all, really. I think my CRM basically was a box of records on the back seat of my car, like a Kalamazoo set, really. But I think it's an important point that perhaps we need to explore a bit more of, is that often when we have conversations with salespeople about sales process, they sort of roll their eyes and go, oh yeah, you mean filling stuff into the CRM. It's admin. But I know we don't agree with that. So what are your thoughts around the uses of CRM and the importance therein for the sales process?
Well, I probably started selling a little bit before you even, Steve. And would I want to go back to those days? 100% not.
Oh, absolutely.
I had a Rolodex and with stuff written on it. I don't know how you can operate, keep professional, keep up to date, be timely with customers without something that helps you manage that massive information, and I think you've mentioned it a couple of times, Jonathan. Rarely do we sell alone. We sell as a team, and we use the people in our organisation to help us to move customers through the sales process. So we have to have somewhere where all of that valuable, important information is shared, and it's in the CRM. So, if someone can show me a better way of managing all that stuff and staying on top of anything, brilliant. I just don't know a better one. I wish I'd had one sooner.
Normally. So it's not just admin, Jonathan, yeah?
No. Although I could probably put my hands up and say I've probably been guilty in the past, like many, of perhaps seeing it like that once upon a time, but no. And I think there's another, sometimes a very simple point that we overlook, that sometimes selling is remarkably easy, okay? And I will admit that I've won orders because I was the only person that kept in touch with a customer over an extended period of time. They may have expressed an interest, just a passing interest in something, that could rely upon, a whole pile of decisions being made in their own business and going in the right sequence, in order for there to be a real need for something that we were selling. And that happened, right? And I kept in touch with the customer, and I was at the end, I was the only game in town. Now, I know things have changed since I started selling, which was probably even before you, Pru. So I trumped that.
Let's not give away our ages here on this guy. So.
I know things have changed. Customers have never had so much immediate access to so much information, and about what it is they're buying, what it is we're selling. They can get peer reviews immediately, but some things don't change, and that ability to track the customer is absolutely critical. So we could probably talk about numerous benefits of having a CRM, but there is one for me that's absolutely crucial.
Sure.
And I think and if you're going to run your business, it is just the best tool. I mean, at some point, we'll almost certainly on one of these podcasts talk about one of my passions, which is building, if anyone's worked with me, a clean and healthy sales funnel or pipeline. And when you're working with many, many deals, right? I defy anybody to remember everything and understand every single next action for every single opportunity, or the next 2 or 3 actions for every single opportunity. You just can't do it, And in terms of prioritizing, briefing others, helping other people, work with you effectively, that information held within the CRM becomes absolutely crucial, not just to your success, but their success. Actually, It's your credibility that's at stake, when you bring in those resources from elsewhere. So just a little bit of a snapshot there in terms of CRM from my perspective.
Some great thoughts there, Jonathan. Well, Jonathan, Pru, it's been really useful to get your insights on what sales as a process is. So just a final thought from both of you, really. So again, if I'm a young salesperson, it's hard to imagine, I know, if I was a young salesperson listening to this right now, thinking, I'm not sure what my sales process is, what would your advice be? First of all, you, Pru, what would you do?
Go and ask your manager. Go back into your business and say, hey, I've heard this term sales process. Can you help us understand? Can you help me understand ours? That's what I would do. And if your manager doesn't know it, I'm sure you can work it out together.
Great. And Jonathan, one thought from you?
And if that doesn't work, I would say, hey, give one of us a ring. We'll happily share with you a typical process. It might be rather generic. And in fact, if you just Google it, you'll find some amazing stuff that very kind people, have posted online, which you can tap into. Have a process, even if your business does not have one. Adopt a process, okay? Something that helps, give you, as we've said, ultimately that structure that helps you make the very best use of your time, and all of those resources are available to you and allows you to prioritize effectively. So I think beyond Pru's advice, that's what I'd say.
Fantastic stuff. So again, I'm sure, as you said, Jonathan, we'll come back and look at sales processes in more detail in the future podcast.
Yes,
I'm sure we will. I guarantee it. So.
Yeah, and I'm sure the conversation will even move on to forecasting as well, which
we haven't even gone there. That was a whole other topic we kind of got into today. But
absolutely.
Again, that's plenty of material for future shows. But on that basis, to the dear listener listening, thanks for Pru and Jonathan, first of all, for your time today. We're going to be back again next month with another show. Until then, don't forget to subscribe. You can subscribe to the show in whatever podcast app that you use. So if you use Apple or Google or Spotify, whatever app you use, don't forget to subscribe. You can contact any of us through our LinkedIn profiles, which are in the show notes on the app that you're using. And you can also email the show at podcasts@georgejames-training.com. That's podcasts@georgejames-training.com. And don't forget to check out more useful sales articles and information, as well as details of all the sales and management courses that we have on our website at www.georgejames-training.com. That's www.georgejames-training.com. Thanks, everybody, and see you next time.